Ladies and gentlemen, this is DVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. In this episode, we're venturing into Belarus, a country that's no stranger to the spotlight, usually for reasons as comforting as a hug from a cactus. Minsk repressions against the Polish minority there has been the focal point of bilateral relations, especially since Lukashenko's sham 2020 presidential elections. We've seen minority activists, teachers, and journalists be detained, and in December 2023, Belarusian authorities decided that Polish language courses were the new front line in their relentless crusade against, well, at this point it's too hard to tell. But let's first take a look at the report to find out more.
On March 25, 2021, a day marked in Belarus's Day of Freedom, the arrest of prominent journalist and activist for the Polish minority Andrzej Poczobut sent shockwaves to the community. For 3 years, Poczobut has faced relentless pressure and torture, denied medication and correspondence from his family. His sentence of 8 years for his journalistic work and subsequent transfer to Belarus's harshest penal colony has raised international concern. For a month now, there has been a deafening silence regarding his whereabouts.
I do not need any pardons. I do not intend to appeal or ask for one, even if they press me. In matters such as mine, such behavior would be immoral and unworthy of the memory of the heroes of the Home Army.
Poczobut's case is emblematic of the broadest struggle for political prisoners in Belarus, where Polish diplomacy has tirelessly but unsuccessfully sought his release. He remains a bargaining chip in the heads of Alexander Lukashenko's regime, particularly in the dealings with Warsaw. Taking a hard stance on the issue, Warsaw imposed sanctions on hundreds of Belarusian citizens, including members of parliament, judges, prosecutors, police officers, and propagandists.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Poland strongly opposes the use of Poles in Belarus as hostages by the authorities in Minsk and reiterates its call for the immediate and unconditional release and rehabilitation of Poczobut and other political prisoners.
The ongoing plight of Andrzej Poczobut and his fellow activists highlights the harsh reality faced by those who dare to challenge the Lukashenko regime. It underscores the need for continued international vigilance and support for the fundamental rights of freedom of expression and association in Belarus.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. In an act that screams we're running out of things to suppress, the Belarusian law enforcement raided Polish language classes late last year, carrying lists of Karta Polaka, or the Poles card, holders like they were the last spots on a lifeboat on the Titanic. The card does not grant Polish citizenship, but is a form of showing your ties to the nation. The head of the Citizenship and Migration Department has declared the Poles card a national security threat, in what can only be described as an explosion of paranoia so intense it could power a small village. The regime's plan was designed to convince Belarusians that having that card meant declaring your undying allegiance to Poland, promise to fulfill any and all of Poland's whim, and presumably vowing to eat pierogi at every given opportunity. The Belarusian state, in its infinite wisdom, has decided to protect its citizens from the horrifying prospect of learning Polish and potentially enjoying some privileges in Poland. But fear not, for the regime has a plan. And if history has taught us anything, is that their plans usually involve a healthy dose of intimidation. Take, for example, the Pan Professor Language School, which experienced a visit from the Special Services one crisp December morning. This raid was not a lone event. Several language schools faced a similar fate, with directors, employees, and teachers detained. Some were even coerced into filming a confession-style penitent video, because, as everyone knows, nothing says guilty like teaching Polish. And to add a sprinkle of terror, they announced that they now possess a complete list of Karta Polaka holders, the traitors. Fast forward to Lukashenko's regime boasting of clipping the wings of those involved with the scheme, a sentiment that's as reassuring as finding a shark in your swimming pool. It's part of a broader crackdown that once targeted the union of Poles in Belarus, leading to arrests and explosions in a spectacle of injustice that would make even the craziest of despots shudder. And yet, despite the crackdown, closures, and arrests, the spirit of the Polish community in Belarus endures. Polish cultural and national identity remains a thorn in the side of the Belarusian regime, a testament to the resilience of those who refuse to let their heritage be stamped out by tyranny. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Kamil Kwashinsky, Senior Fellow at the Department for Belarus, Ukraine, and Moldova at the Center for Eastern Studies. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation.
So, can you first help us understand the reason behind the targeting of the Polish minority and the Polish language in Belarus? This seemed to be something very specific.
Polish minority is the biggest minority which is connected with one of Western neighbors of Belarus, member of NATO and member of European Union, which is of course Poland. Russian minority is bigger, but it's not. The Russian people they're not living in one place, in one specific part of the country. Russia, of course, is a key ally of Belarus, so relations are completely different. Poland is presented in Belarusian propaganda, personally also by Alexander Lukashenko, as a main enemy, Western enemy, devil, evil, or anything else, what is bad, or even the worst. And that's why Polish minority also is a target of repressions, especially activists from independent organizations like Union of Poles, this illegal from regime's point of view, illegal organization, Union of Poles, and Andrzej Poczobut was a deputy and still is a deputy of head of this organization.
Right, of course, we know Poczobut has been arrested no less than a dozen times and is now serving, wow, God knows how many years, and this is like his third year after his arrest already. And I was also wondering the very peculiar timing of this, because we do know that the increase of crackdown on the Polish minority inside Belarus started around the year 2020. So can you help us understand what changed between, before and after that specific timing?
Yes, it wasn't an accident, something accidental. A coincidence is very clear here. Everything started after August 2020, after crackdown in Belarus, after political crisis in Belarus, after presidential elections, when also Poland became a main enemy, as I mentioned, of Belarusian regime, main enemy, one of main enemies, together, for example, with the United States of America, the Western enemies of the regime. So Poland was accused of attempts of preparations to riot in Belarus, some destabilization of the internal order of Belarus, annexation of Belarus, at least part of Belarus, western part of Belarus. So there were and there still are a lot of accusations towards Poland. And the Union of Poles was accused of being a part of this Polish plan. Also accusation towards Andrzej Poczobut personally concerned historical policy of memory, which was, according to Belarusian regime, a glorification of Nazism. I know that it sounds ridiculous what Poland could have in common with Nazism, but this is a logic of half totalitarian regime. Andrzej Poczobut was accused of that he he was dealing at that time in March and February of 2021 with glorification of Nazis and a glorification of Polish plan of genocide of Belarusian nation during Second World War and just after Second World War. So a lot of absurd, ridiculous ideas and accusations, and based on this, he was sentenced for 8 years of prison.
Right, so like you mentioned, these are very ridiculous charges, especially when the accusation of Nazism very kind of similar to the rhetoric that the Kremlin uses against the Ukrainians right now. But on this point, I'm also curious because we are talking about more geopolitical reasons for Belarus to now be against Poland, or at least the Polish minority within its own country. However, we are seeing the stamping out of even the Polish language and any trace of the Polish culture within Belarus. Why do you think Lukashenko feels so passionate about weeding out even like the culture aspect of the Polish minority?
I always had a feeling that Lukashenko is anti-Polish, deeply anti-Polish in his soul, in his mind. He is a very Soviet man. He grew up in eastern Belarus in 50s and 60s. It was a time of his childhood and youth. Also, the beginning of his professional activity, professional career, it was the end of the Soviet Union. So the most important part of life, which is important for each a human being. It was in case of Lukashenko, it was a time of the Soviet Union. So his mindset is very Soviet, and he never changed his approach to many things. Also towards Poland, according to Soviet cliche, Poland was a troublemaker. Always was a troublemaker. All Polish uprisings, revolutions, and other things were against a holy mother of Russia, against Soviet Union, and that's why Lukashenko doesn't trust and didn't trust any time to Poland, to Polish policy towards Belarus. The situation became much worse after 2020, when, as we can see here on this picture, Putin became main ally, unprecedented close ally of Lukashenko. Lukashenko, after demonstrations, huge demonstrations on Belarusian streets in Minsk and other cities after elections, he understood that Russia could be only one support, only one ally, which could help him to keep power, to remain still remain a president of a Republic of Belarus. And Poland, as a promoter, one of main promoters of sanctions against the Belarusian regime, of course, logically, according to his logic, became a threat. And all Polish organizations, all Polish activists are supported by Warsaw, financed from Poland as Union of Poles, also became a threat. And all things went very, very far, unprecedentedly far. As you mentioned, even Polish language and Polish heritage, Polish cemeteries are a threat, some danger. According to Lukashenko, that's why Belarusian authorities would like to erase, even in literal meaning, erase everything what concerns Poland and Polish heritage, which is part of common history of Poland and Belarus. All this heritage, which is still there, which is still mostly in western part of Belarus.
Right. You mentioned the word ally between Russia and Belarus. And of course, throughout this war, we can clearly see that. And one of the things that I do like to direct our attention to is also the similarities when it comes to the rhetoric they use. Like you were just saying, for example, the Belarusians calling Poles essentially Nazis, which are the same thing that Putin has been calling the Ukrainians. And I'm also observing maybe a little bit of the similar, if not the same attitude when Putin looks at Poland and the way Lukashenko looks at Poland. So can you help us understand how their rhetoric aligns?
Yes, this Russian-Belarusian alliance after 2020 became unprecedented close. Of course, before 2020, before crackdown elections, both countries were cooperating with each other. They were also allies, but uh, Lukashenko was more distant from Kremlin. He understood at that time that very convenient for him is something like game with West, some kind of dialogue with West, just to keep a space of maneuver in international affairs. After 2020, Lukashenko and Belarus has only one ally. This is Russia. This is Vladimir Putin. and this unprecedented level of cooperation is visible in all spheres, also in sphere of in the policy of memory, also in media, as you mentioned, and I fully agree that content of Belarusian propaganda became more or less the same as Russian content of propaganda is. We can see also a lot of similarities between policies of memory between both countries. Practically, it means, as Belarus is much weaker than Russia, that Belarus became more Russian, not a pro-Russian, but even Russian in many kinds of activities. Also in the sphere of media and policy of memory.
All right, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really helped us unpack a lot of this topic. So thanks again for being with us on Eastern Express. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the latest stories from the East that you don't want to miss. The Russian ambassador to Poland did not appear for a meeting at the Polish Foreign Ministry after he was summoned to discuss the Russian missile that entered Polish airspace. Sergei Andreyev claimed that he did not attend because Poland had not provided evidence of the violation.
Following the recent incident in which a Russian missile violated Polish airspace, the Polish Foreign Ministry summoned Russian Ambassador Sergei Andreyev and demanded an explanation. However, he did not comply. He said he didn't go to the Foreign Ministry because Polish authorities had not provided evidence of the airspace violation. He added he was still waiting for evidence supporting Warsaw's previous accusation that a Russian cruise missile flew into Polish airspace on December 29th last year. The latest violation is Russia's third since the start of the war.
The ruling Georgian Dream Coalition in Tbilisi is proposing a constitutional change that would restrict LGBTQ rights marrying legislation in Russia. This move could further hinder Georgia's path to joining the European Union.
The draft changes in Georgia, aimed at protecting family values in minors, would prohibit gatherings and dissemination of content promoting same-sex relationships, ban sex changes, and prevent same-sex couples from adopting children. Critics of the proposed legislation view these changes as contradictory to EU values and suspect they are a tactic to secure support from the conservative voter base ahead of parliamentary elections. Some link the move to Russian-style illiberalism, which undermines Georgia's EU accession aspirations. Despite Georgian Dream's claims of widespread support, opposition voices label the proposed changes as pitiful and suggest focusing on more pressing issues affecting families. Comparisons are drawn to similar legislation in Hungary, which paradoxically saw an increase in support for same-sex marriage.
Serbia has marked the 25th anniversary of the 1999 NATO bombings with a march organized by a far-right organization. The ultra-right Narodna Patrola group used this occasion to express its support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Supporters of extreme right-wing movements in Serbia gathered for the demonstration in Belgrade, marking the 25th anniversary of the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. The protests, organized by the ultra-right Narodna Patrola organization, took place near the former General Staff building, which was destroyed during the 11-week bombing campaign. The demonstration prominently featured the Serbian flag adorned with the letter Z, a symbol of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, alongside pro-Russian banners. In 1999, the US-led NATO forces carried out continuous airstrikes for 78 days against Yugoslavia, leaving more than 8,000 civilians dead or injured and nearly 1 million more displaced. The bombings were a response to reports that Serbs were carrying out an ethnic cleansing of Albanian citizens.
In the aftermath of a deadly attack near Moscow, Kyrgyzstan has advised its citizens against traveling to Russia due to heightened pressure on Central Asian migrant workers. Russian authorities have detained suspects, mainly ethnic Tajiks, in connection with the attack. However, doubts linger regarding their direct involvement, with some suggesting they may have been manipulated.
Kyrgyzstan has called on its citizens not to travel to Russia, where Central Asian migrant workers and visitors are facing enormous pressure following last week's terrorist attack near Moscow. Reports indicate that Tajik migrants in Russia face threats, verbal abuse and increased harassment. Russian authorities have intensified security measures, including a random checks on non-Russians, further exacerbating migrant anxieties. The legal situation worsens as Russian authorities disregard legalities in their investigation. Human rights activists, including those supporting migrant laborers who could align themselves with Tajik migrants, have fled Russia since the start of the invasion of Ukraine.
And that concludes this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.